And it is sad to point out that many women learn that silence is safer. If I don't rock the boat, everything will be okay. In extreme cases, it would be if I speak, I lose love.
It is risky to use our voice sometimes, and that can be uncomfortable. So to develop and build a little bit of tolerance to the risk it takes sometimes to use our voices, to not back down from that, and to have the courage to say it. You never know the difference it makes.
Have you ever longed to be able to talk about values and morals or faith and spirituality without feeling judged? Hi, and welcome to our podcast, Mindful Moments, Insights to Empower the Soul. This podcast will empower you to embrace your true self.
Welcome to our podcast. We are so glad you're here. My name is Sharilyn Green, and we are marriage and family therapists who care so deeply about values, morals, spirituality, and the principles of a healthy relationship with ourselves, with others, and with God, or for many, a higher power.
I'm Dr. Debi Gilmore, and today we want to talk about women and the challenges women have faced through the generations to believe that they can have a positive influence on the world. We're going to talk about the importance of women being able to find their voice, and we'll explain more what that means, how we as women can use our voices to speak up and speak out. And the challenge for women has always been to have a sense that they are second-class citizens or that they carry less value than their male counterparts. And that's tragic to me. This has been a topic that's been fascinating to me for probably my entire life, but I didn't realize it until recently when I started to research it and really wanted to find a way to conquer this perception of lower value. It's important to note, though, that this is not about bashing men, not at all, or suggesting that women should be valued above men. No. Actually, we're hoping to point out the incredible power of influence women can have as they assume a status of equal importance in the world that has often been overlooked. The power of women. Throughout history, we have incredible examples of women who have beaten the odds and changed the world through miraculous inventions and groundbreaking research, discoveries, remarkable drug discoveries, and in global leadership roles. Historically, women's voices have faced many limitations, and we do live in unprecedented times when women's thoughts, their opinions, and voices are beginning to enjoy greater freedom and influence. Love that word. More influence than any other time. And as women, Sharilyn, you and me, seeking to be a force for good, that really is our intent with this podcast. We share a great responsibility to be as intentional as we can about using our voice, perhaps honoring and even speaking for those voices who can't yet, have not always felt heard, who soon, I hope soon will be, and who've paved the way for us today.
They really have paved the way, and I feel a deep sense of responsibility to Debbie to use our voice. We do live in unprecedented times, and the opportunities we have never been greater. You know, you think about women in ancient Greece who were excluded from political life and public speech, Roman women who were mediated through their fathers and husbands, China, the foot binding that restricted women's mobility, their independence, and made public dissent and speech a place of shame and punishment for their entire family. And so as you're talking, I just think back, even just these general historical environments that women were in. And you even think about individual women and what that must have been like for them. You know, I try to picture that a little bit and maybe what I would have even done in those circumstances. And so it's something to honor in a way that we use our voices today with deep respect for those who have paved the way so that we can use our voices in greater ways. Sadly, though, there's still limitations today in our voices, and it might be helpful for us to pause for just a moment and mention some of the countless women whose voices weren't allowed and who used their voice at great cost. These are women we're all familiar with. One of my great heroes is Joan of Arc. You know, when she used her voice, she was tried for heresy and burned at the stake at age 19. She had such an impact and influence, but at the end of the day, at age 19, her voice was silenced. The Bronte sisters, who wrote these books that we love, Jane Eyre, Wuthering Heights, Agnes Grey, They had to do it under male names because it was a male-dominated literary world back in Victorian England. Rosa Parks, another hero, who had to actually speak with her body when words weren't allowed. I remember traveling to Memphis and going to the Civil Rights Museum and seeing the bus that she was on, and how profound that was for me to understand better her life and her voice. And so I never want to take for granted the times that we are living in, and think about, what it would have been like for me to live in a different time, and to be so grateful and intentional about using my voice.
These women that you've pointed out, singled out, the sad thing is they made such a difference and have such a powerful influence today. But while they were alive, they didn't realize that there would be tributes to them. And what I would hope for is that women would recognize now and be aware of the power they do carry in being able to influence now, and find joy in that, now. So let's focus on first how this impacts relationships. You and I, Sharilyn, we specialize in the use of emotionally focused therapy, or EFT for short, with our clients. This model of therapy is based on attachment science and emotional safety. Unfortunately, many women have learned or been conditioned that using their voice can risk their attachment bond, the safety in their most important relationships. And it creates the possibility of rejection or emotional punishment, shame, or even the sense of abandonment. And it is sad to point out that many women learn that silence is safer. Here's an example. If I don't rock the boat, everything will be okay. Using the voice leads to danger. If I say it, I might be attacked or even mocked and humiliated. That creates survival strategies when needs aren't safe to express in that most important relationship. But I want to point out this is not a weakness, it is survival. And as therapists, we often identify these dynamics in relationships, and it's so deeply concerning. And we have to be gentle about how we work with these couples to help them recognize it and shift and change out of those patterns. Women who withdraw to protect themselves in work, that is another concern. Sometimes silence has been required for so long, and over time, eventually, it then erupts into protests and rage, even. In extreme cases, if we could sum up the bind that many women feel, it would be this: if I speak, I lose love.
I love that we're kind of breaking this down to the root of it all, in these attachment science that we understand, and how that affects our voice. So with our EFT training, you and I know that our nervous systems are constantly scanning to know some things. It wants to know, are you there for me? Do I matter to you? Is it safe to show you what I feel? Will you respond if I risk vulnerability? And when women especially aren't allowed to speak or punished for speaking, just like you discussed, their attachment system learns that reaching is dangerous. And so, as you said, we develop these survival skills when that happens, protective strategies, actually. And some of those look like going quiet or numb, becoming really self-reliant, where I don't need anyone. It's not safe to need people. And so we can see a lot of unhealthy self-reliance. There can be an overfunctioning instead of sharing our needs or our voice, and then avoiding conflict at all cost. Some other kind of protest strategies that you talked about, sometimes it erupts. We've been quiet for so long, and so there can be an intensity and a repetition and a constant pressing that sort of erupts when we swing the other way, an anxiety or an urgency, kind of an asking, why won't you listen to me, that can feel like anger, which we know is just sitting on top of hurt and the fear that women especially have felt. Or we see this a lot in our world today. We feel like we have to get louder to be heard or to matter. And so we want to talk about especially that we don't have to be louder to be heard.
That's right. And, as I think about these couples that come in, and you and I know when we see them, we pick up on it quickly because we almost expect this. The thing that happens is this is passed down through generations, this attitude that the one partner, the male partner, has more perceived power because society promotes that, or that's what they witnessed in the model of their parents. So it's not this evil intent, it's just that's what they know. And so, on a positive and more forward thinking note, there are many places women can use their voice and so many ways to do so. We can use our voice to better express opinions, thoughts, or feelings, even in times when it might be scary or hard. We just have to first find the courage to be able to say, wait, this needs to be said. How can I say it? We encourage our couples, actually, particularly the husbands, to shift their language in vulnerable moments, responding with something like, I'm so glad you told me that. Now, that might be difficult at first to say, oh, I'm so glad you told me. They might even say something like, it's hard for me to hear this, but I am glad that we're talking about it. It can be so hard to be honest about how we're feeling as women or doing because we worry we will be seen as weak or too sensitive and shut down our voices when we've learned to become invisible to be safe. But we're not encouraging women to go into shouts and fits and protests. We're not talking about volume and violence. That actually doesn't work. It backfires and only serves to offend others and cause them to move into defensiveness and resistance to any message that we as women might want to bring. We are talking about the power of women through a whisper, through truth. When we speak truth, our spirits wake up. Our spirits open up and listen through inner confidence when we convey through a whisper, when we convey courage and gentle influence. When I think of women who've had the greatest impact on me, I actually think of those who know who they really are. They just have a solid sense of who they really are. Women who face fear head on and hold their head high through gracious and gentle leadership. I'm thinking of Eleanor Roosevelt, who had very fragile self-worth when she was a teenager. But when she was asked, how did you conquer that? She actually responded, I just faced fear head on. It's really important to understand that when women find their voice by knowing who they really are, they're cultivating more security and making connection possible two ways. When they convey this, it's a confidence that's safe to be with. It is women nurturing healthy attachment in anyone with whom they might interact.
Yeah, I love that. It helps me to realize that by using my voice in that way, I actually become an advocate for secure attachment, that I won't disappear, that this is me helping that happen. So I love that you talk about how scary it can be, because it is. We never want to underestimate, the fear of this. But I also know that when we can practice this, that fear actually can pretty even quickly go away. It's kind of surprising to me sometimes when we just, like you said, Eleanor Roosevelt, face our fears. It can go away even pretty quickly. So we want to talk about some of the better ways that we can practice using our voices and moving our voices from insecurity to security. So some ideas: to learn to be clear, honest, and direct. I love those words. To be able to tolerate risk. It is risky to use our voice sometimes, and that can be uncomfortable. So to develop and build a little bit of tolerance to the risk it takes sometimes to use our voices. To have the courage to speak up when we see that something isn't right or a truth needs to be voiced. We have so many, like you said, beautiful examples of women who have done that at so much greater risk than we do it. But to have the courage to speak up when something's not right, not just let it go, not let it just pass by. To speak up and speak out when we have important things to say, no matter what the circumstances are we might be in, always with respect and kindness. But that can be in our homes, it can be in our marriages, it can be in our professional roles, our leadership roles, our faith community, our community roles, every environment, that when we have something important to say, to not back down from that and to have the courage to say it. You never know the difference it can make. We will never know the difference it makes. So our voices can be used also for great good, just to do things like express admiration, compassion, encouragement, confidence, peace, and love to others. There's so many different environments that we do this, small and big. Our voices can be used to awaken conscience in those around us and in ourselves. It can provide moral clarity and create change. It can give courage and clarity to others. I'm inspired when I see women who do this well. It encourages and brings me clarity about how I want to do that. And I think we can be so collaborative as women in beautiful ways to help each other use our voices for good. And so we're hoping that we can create intentional ways to use our voice to create good in the world. And again, there's just so many ways to do that. But I'm loving that we're talking about this and thinking about how we can do that.
As you were talking about, when we do this, we actually influence others to have the courage to do this. Basically, when we really have clarity in our values and we choose to rise up and speak out, we're giving others permission to do the same. And that's actually what's happened for me as I've witnessed others. But I do want to focus just for a minute on the danger that as women, our voices can reflect rage and anger, sarcasm, disrespect, even contempt. We sometimes see this in media and in the public realm. And when we see this, we might be tempted to think that's the only way that we can be heard. And if you think about it, it's off-putting. It actually is counter to the nature of women in general as nurturers. And we can nurture with assertiveness. In contrast, as women, our voices can reflect remarkable characteristics. Here's some examples: courage, meekness, which is not weakness, power. I love that word, power. What does that actually mean? Power does not mean damage. Power means with might and with respectful force, with confidence, with clarity and strength of character, enlightenment. When we realize what our values are and we want to speak out to reinforce those values, we actually learn more and more about ourselves and what we believe in. We can be encouraging to others to rise up, inspired, and to receive that revelation personally, to be empowered, to find better ways to lead out. But I think the key word here that I want to settle on is to lead with love, especially in our homes. That's when we can really get the attention of others. As women in a world with the opportunity for greater influence, we do have that. There are pathways now. There are others who are starting to realize the value of the power in women. We believe that women using their voices can make a great difference in many places, in the home, in the neighborhood, in the community, and beyond. Our voices reflect our identity, our purpose, our mission, our values, our goals, and our wisdom.
As you're talking about this, I'm envisioning little girls in a home watching a mother do this. Talk about generational influence, right? Even just in our homes, to model this, to understand this, to be intentional about this. I mean, the impact of that is staggering to me as you talk. Debbie, I hope it's okay. I want to put you on the spot just a little bit because hey, I have admired your voice in every arena I can think of, the way you talk on a one-to-one level, the way you talk in groups, the way you just so many settings. And I actually would love to understand. I mean, you've written books, you speak, you present, you write monthly newsletters, you supervise countless therapists, you use your voice in intimate therapeutic settings to heal. Your personal private conversations are impressive. I would love to understand how you've done this. If that's okay. Sorry, I'm throwing you a curveball.
Well, you really are, because actually, Sharilyn, I see you the same. And I watch for those characteristics in others. It's really interesting. In order to answer your question, I first want to admit that I'm humbled, because throughout my life, for some reason, I have watched other women with power. Those that I'm impressed with, I've taken copious notes. Just something inside of me has said, I want to be like that. I do see this in you as well. And I want to say that I owe you so much because I've been inspired by you. But I do owe so much to powerful women that I have recognized as powerful. And I've admired some from afar. I've also had the opportunity to ask some of them, How do you do this? I have seen mighty women lead with the whisper of power. So, most importantly, these women, every one of them knew and know who they really are. They exude confidence and a desire not to overrule others. That's the thing that's impressed me so much. They want to empower others, so they use their power to do that. The other thing that I've recognized specifically is they know that they can influence others through their own clarity about their values. I said that earlier, and that's one of the things that has inspired me. They speak with assertiveness, not aggression, and they share their opinions with clarity. And I like this 3-word phrase: clear, direct, and non threatening. But here's the bottom line: they lead with love and they don't back down. This is the thing that I wanted to really spend just a minute on, is that they don't back down when faced with opposition or protests. In fact, I've noticed they expect the protest and respectfully address the other's opinion and then respectfully share their point of view. That's dangerous and that's risky. But I think about these women, Sharilyn, that you have mentioned, and they had to face opposition even for fear of their life, but there was for a greater good. And so I thank you so much for asking about this. But, there's some other things that I'm hoping that we can talk about. They teach fearlessly, Sherilyn. You do that. I know you do. Do you sense that about you?
I do. Thank you. I do want to, at least I want to teach fearlessly. And I actually want to do that in better ways than I've done in the past. I feel an urgency to teach with even less fear. Yeah.
And that's hard because when we're faced with fear, it robs us of confidence. Fear and self-doubt are the counter to having faith and courage to rise above. It's interesting. It just occurred to me, I have this deep respect for those serving in the military on the front lines. And I think about police officers, first responders, those that rush toward the fire instead of running away from it. And I have been fascinated by that. How do they do that? Why do they do that? Well, when you ask them, they say, because I value people, I value my country, I value freedom. I value freedom of religion and being able to speak without fear of being knocked down. But if I'm going to have to do that to preserve lives, I will do that. So this is another one: speaking out with strength. Here's another one: the gift of discernment. I know you love that. I call it a power, a personal power, maybe a superpower. When you can take that discernment and discern the difference between right and wrong, good and evil. When you have watched for that and been aware of it, find it, stand for it, and don't back down. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, Sherilyn, you suggested that's who I am. It's actually what I want to be. And so every day practicing just a little bit of one of those traits, it soon becomes a part of us. So I'm hoping one day that I can live up to what you suggested I am. It's a work in progress.
I love that you say that. I do see you there, but I love just the concept that we can practice. And there's so many opportunities every single day. I mean, there's so many, even just in a day when we think about this. How do I use my voice in these ways, in this situation? You said something earlier that before we started this that I can't stop thinking about either. You said, I like to meet people where they are, listen, and then express my opinion. I love that you said that. I see that our voices are more effective, more influential when we can do it that way.
I think about Dr. Marshall Rosenberg, who was actually a clinical psychologist, and his forte was working with leaders of countries that were at odds with each other. And he suggested the first thing you do is help them feel seen, help the enemy feel seen. We do this with our couples. When we see couples that are at odds with each other, we go to each one and say, what hurts? What's hard for you? And then say, well, that makes sense to me. You're frustrated because you feel invisible. But when you can meet someone where they are first, when they feel seen, they're more likely to listen to you. So validating the other human. I do think it would be important, though, for us to suggest some questions that you can ask yourself to assess, how do I feel about my ability to influence others as a woman? So here's one. Am I afraid to use my own voice? If so, why? And how can I find greater confidence? Or when I do use my voice, do I use it with respect, with kindness, with compassion, with clarity and moral courage and love? Here's another one. How can I encourage safety for every voice in my home and with my loved ones and friends? Notice that's looking at the other, encouraging safety so that I can use my voice. Why would someone want to listen to me if they don't feel safe with me? Are there places where my voice might make a difference? And what would some of those places be? That might be some homework, Sharilyn. I think we could encourage those that are listening to say, what are some places where I might have influence? And once you have identified those places, am I willing to speak up and speak out? What would one step be that I could take to move toward that new power of influence?
I love that. And I guess we're to the point where you and I get to talk about one thing we're going to do. You and I have talked about it's one thing to just talk about things, it's another thing entirely to make changes in our lives. And so this is one of my favorite parts of our podcast is when I can really think and reflect on what am I going to actually change in my life and be different because of these things that we're talking about. So for me, there's a couple of words that I guess in my mind sum up the way I want to do this. I love the word grace and I love the word truth. I want to speak with truth. For me, truth encompasses all that we have just talked about today. You're right. Our spirit resonates when we're speaking truth, but I want to do that with a lot of grace for myself and with other people. So to speak truth with grace is something I'm going to think about. I love some counsel from a leader in our church. When he talks about women's voices, he says we should speak with confidence and charity. And so it's another way of saying that for me, that there's this confidence when we know who we are and what we believe, what our values are, but we do it with the utmost charity for others. And so I think that's my takeaway from our discussion today.
Oh, I love that you said that. What is charity? It's the pure love of Christ. And when we can emulate that, and this idea of grace and truth, I want us to speak about that all the time. I would never apologize and hope that you won't feel the need to apologize for using that word grace all the time. But my therefore what, I am realizing that, and when I do this, it seems to shift the mood immediately. When I come upon a woman and see that they don't yet realize the power of influence they have. I have been doing this more and more lately. I ask them, do you realize the power that you bring to this relationship or to this world? Do you recognize the power that you have, the potential in you? Sometimes they respond with, oh, no, I don't think so. So I invite them to think about, why would I say that? Why would I say that? And maybe my therefore what is to suggest to all of our listeners, therefore what? What does this mean for you? Do you recognize the power that you bring to this world, to your relationships, for the opportunity to influence for good? And so that's mine.
I'm so grateful that that's how we're ending this. Do we recognize the power we have? Perfect.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this discussion, and all of our listeners. We hope that you will spread the news and help people find us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, everybody. Bye.